What's up? This is part 3 of my walkthrough for Krein. We're on the third quest in the main quest chain, the Recluse. This is surprisingly long because when I played through it, it felt a lot shorter, but it's much longer than it feels, it seems, because this video is going to be like half an hour. This quest has a lot of content with a lot of variety as well, so we basically just got a brief period of vanilla kind of content, or at least look and feel, with the previous quest being out here in the open. And very quickly we're going back to completely new and different environments and such. We start off going through the forest again, which reminds me that the skybox quality even in Oldrim is impressive, especially contrasted with small details in outside environments in particular. And actually, some of the sky settings are more boring in SSE for some reason. I don't know if they just switch things around, but for example, one of the moons doesn't show up, or no moon shows up in some sky types, and the sky is more boring and cloudy. So I don't exactly know the reasoning for that. Anyway.
What was that?
I said we're there.
What was that?
Here we have a completely new presentation, new cave type, new architecture. The stonework has a simple overall layout, and it focuses on small details to make it distinct, with the etching along the individual stones, for example. But it's too broad to say that it's inspired by any particular architecture. It has some patterns maybe reminiscent of European architecture, kind of, but not really. So it's overall original. Very heavy again on cold colors for the background of the environment, but unlike in the first quest, there are a number of fireplaces that give it a warm and inviting contrast, making it feel less dreary and maybe more mysterious, I think. Now, here's the next boss, ya boy Orb, the big eyeball, which is the same name as the eyeball monster in Quake 3 Arena, which is a good game by the way, just not as good as Unreal Tournament. Now this boss, I'm pretty sure, has 3 abilities, and the first is he'll spawn a magical dark aura that approaches you and basically destroys your health the closer you get to it. The closer it is, the more damage it does. Simply moving away from that remedies it. Then there's the laser charge attack that causes an AoE that can do hefty damage if you're not careful. And finally, he'll spawn adds every so often and cause an explosion along with it, which basically kills you, so you have to stay away from that altogether. And then, once that's done, just keep killing the adds, which are wisps in this case, until it goes into the second phase, which is only where the laser charge is left. At that point, we're going to use range attacks to destroy the eyeball. Pretty straightforward overall. A couple more mechanics than what we'd fought previously, except for Zurikon. So I guess it's a little harder-ish overall. Oh, also there are 2 different sides you can move to, because clearly fighting on the balcony is not a good idea, since it doesn't give you any space, and you'll probably die anyway from the black hole orb. that follows you. Obviously, again, an anti-melee fight and all that. Range attacks are probably the only thing that I guess the wisps, of course, you could do melee on the wisps. In fact, it's maybe preferable, so it's not entirely a ranged fight. But I do hope there are a few spells that you have. And at this point, your character's probably leveled enough so that they have something in the spell section anyway. So, overall, again, I think that was a little harder than most of the previous ones. Except for Zurikon, because that was kind of an optional fight. Well, it's not an optional fight, but it's optional that you win, because if you're defeated, then you just get kicked out, you don't die. So, now that that's done, soon we're going to go in this next part, which is the Vampire Castle.
You imagined. I have an idea.
An idea? You were hiding in the bushes the entire time.
I personally call it scouting.
Are you bloody kidding me?
Look, do you want my help or not?
I've literally never asked for your help.
Okay. I promise I'll help next time. Besides, he's gone for good.
What's your next brilliant plan to get us killed then, you fork-tongued brigand?
Can't say where he's going, but I may know someone who does.
You may know? Did the Thieves Guild teach you how to speak in common tongue?
I do know where he is.
All right, I'm finished. Dragonborn, I'm leaving this up to you. This madman is going to get us killed. If I'm being perfectly
And
honest,
like I said, Vampire's
I'm
not a big
starting
deal
to
if it's
rethink
just something
this
on the
whole
side,
journey.
unlike
No
Dawnguard.
matter.
But I think in vanilla Skyrim, if I remember correctly, there were
Need something.
just a curiosity on the side, and there was like 2 quests that highlighted them, give or take, which was the Elder Scrolls feel, I think. It better stay that way in 6.2, although I'm increasingly nervous towards anything with that much reputation value being released by Bethesda, seeing as how their recent productions have all been very flimsy. The quest design has become increasingly formulaic and lackluster, as seen in Starfield. Supposedly, the main writer in Starfield on the dev team, now I don't know that they said this for sure, but I have heard down the grapevine
Out
that
of sheer
they said
luck,
something like,
I suppose.
writing in games
Not that
don't matter, or something like
Oh,
that.
sure it does.
If it's true,
What were
then
you doing?
oh dude, totally, it doesn't matter. So much that me and a number of people I know stopped playing,
Stendhal spoke to me. He led me
largely
to
because of the bad writing in the quest, the uninspired, boring writing. Yeah, it totally doesn't matter.
Are you going to lecture
Although,
me
that's
about
just scratching the surface of
vampires
that.
and witches?
I have seen people, by the way,
That's rather insulting.
on
even
my
to
Steam
you.
friends list, like half a dozen of them,
You're a little
playing games like Fallout 3, Skyrim, Oblivion, stuff like that.
I'm just going to
Like,
ignore you from now on.
48 hours within the release of Starfield, which I thought was pretty cool. If you were playing an old Bethesda game right after Starfield came out, and you didn't even buy Starfield, I think you're the coolest person ever. I hope someone was able to save you $70 or whatever the cost of that game was. There's even part of me that feels like maybe Elder Scrolls should go the way of Half-Life and be set in stone the way it is, because I'd rather see the series end on a good note than have a disaster from Elder Scrolls 6. For example, Cyberpunk 2077 was memed to hell just because it was so buggy on release. But with Bethesda, we're not just talking about big bug issues. We're talking about all of the above, flimsy design across the board in writing, gameplay, look and feel, UI bugs, so on. So if a game is overhyped and then it comes out not only buggy, but a flop, then that would be a disaster, especially for Elder Scrolls fans that are waiting for 6. Because imagine how it was in for Cyberpunk 2077, which I wasn't really into that. I didn't even know about it until like maybe a few months prior to the release. But apparently it was very, very hyped, and CD Projekt Red released the teaser for it or something like that, like 5 or 6 years before release. So it was very hyped. And when it came out, everyone and their grandma was doing videos about how buggy it was. But that's not what we're talking about with something like a Bethesda game, with Elder Scrolls 6. It's going to be, it has to be awesome. It has to be at least as good as Skyrim in some particular way. Not like, oh, maybe the gameplay is good.
Why are you just standing there?
Fat chance. Or maybe it's the atmosphere again. Great. Okay, we captured the atmosphere. There has to be something that stands out to where people appreciate it. Otherwise, it's not good. It's going to be a bad time. And it seems more and more Bethesda is basically relying on modders to do the dirty work, in that,
Are you sure this is the right
like, they half-ass a game, and then the modders come in and, you know, add all the bells and whistles and stuff. So they're basically profiting off of them, in the sense that they know that the modders are going to do that anyway. So they don't have to do it as much. They don't have to improve the game as much. Skin textures, and high quality models are a great example of that. It's like, dude, Unreal Tournament 3, which was released in 2007, had better model detail than vanilla Skyrim, which was released in like late 11, 12 or something like that. It's like, okay, why though? You're a AAA studio. Anyway, but that's a different thing. I just hope that they understand that it's important that Elder Scrolls 6 comes out like properly and not a disaster. It cannot, like, I think maybe it would be a nail in the coffin, not the final nail, but a nail in the coffin for Bethesda, which already has a tarnished reputation. Now, everyone knows that Starfield got hammered by everyone, and rightfully so, but it was an unknown title, not anticipated. And then even then it was memed. Like, every big, and by every I mean most big streamers that talked about it in an honest way, straightforward way, admitted like, it was for something that Bethesda was talking, this is our first new franchise in over 10 years or something. And it was a flop. Yeah, but it wasn't anticipated, no matter what anyone says. Nobody cared about it. Nobody really knew what it was. Yeah, the 10%, the 3 Bethesda superfans, not a Fallout superfans or Skyrim or Elder Scrolls superfans, but the 3 specifically Bethesda corporate fans probably anticipated it, but for the most part, no. It wasn't. No matter how many game outlets pretend that it was. Anyway, but the point is, it got memed. So imagine how bad it would be if it's hugely anticipated and then it comes out as a flop. Yeah, and nobody cares about it to that extent. Nobody cares about the Starfield lore, including the rioters self-admittedly, supposedly. So I just have my fingers crossed that if it comes out, it's at least as much of an Elder Scrolls experience as Skyrim itself. I know there's like old school Elder Scrolls fans that long for the days of Oblivion and Morrowind, where it was more of an RPG feel, whereas Skyrim was more, I don't want to say watered down, but it was to appeal to a wider audience, more normified, I guess. nonetheless, Skyrim, all-time great game, of course.
Better be worth it.
How does this thing work?
I don't think we're going back to the old school days, though.
The lever's on the other side.
And here I become a spooky skeleton who is OP, and it's pretty straightforward, actually, to run through this part, because there's really one objective in it. You can explore a little bit, but it's not really like you can get lost here. Now, this is a shanty town, which is reminiscent of Kowloon Walled City in some respects. It does have a sense of density, but it would have been cool to also add an outer layer around it with walkways and claustrophobia-inducing alleyways and such like that. Maybe in another life. Unfortunately, the objective indicators are fixed to the player character origin, which makes it annoying. But that's just Bethesda overlooking something that should have been made more general in the first place. Like, why would you fix the objectives to the character rather than the camera origin? That doesn't make any sense. But anyway, this place is a bit different in that there are a lot of direct contrasts of blue and red, with the reddish colors making things more creepy rather than inviting and warm, as usually warm colors feel more attractive in some cases. Overall, it's just a nice, spooky little place that uses vanilla set pieces in a different way. Then, entering Apocrypha, there's a small puzzle where you have to figure out the pattern given a set of words, which you just have to read in sequential order, which I think is pretty natural, so it's a quick filler for an otherwise empty presentation of a novel style of the usage of the Apocrypha set piece. So here, there's two different ways to get through after that. And so the player has a choice. There are actually half a dozen or so places where the player has a choice as to how to get through a particular quest that leads to a totally different area. On the one hand, in this case, you could fight a boss. On the other hand, there's another puzzle. And I would say both are challenging, although the boss less so if you're a magic caster, say, you have a good bow and arrow or crossbow enchantment and so on. Maybe you can do pretty good damage. As again, it's an anti-melee boss, of course. And yeah, we're getting to the anti-magic fights, some anti-ranged fights, I think, in a little bit. We'll see. Of course, if you have a submachine gun mod or something ridiculous like that, you have an MP4 or an M4A1 or something, then probably nothing is challenging, and then you don't have to even care. Which I frankly don't understand people who have like 3,000 mods, and half of them are the most lore unfriendly thing or unimmersive, and you're playing a DLC mod or a story mod. Like, bro, why do you have Thomas the Tank Engine instead of a regular dragon? Or, more accurately, worms for you fantasy nerds. Because worms are winged creatures with only 2 legs, and then dragons with 4, and the wing. Anyway. But, yeah, look. Oh, for example, why are you dressed like Master Chief from Halo, and you have Hulk Hogan as a follower when you're doing the Thieves Guild quest chain or something? Or immersive quests like that? Y'all are crazy, honestly. I don't understand that at all. Anyway, I think I chose the puzzle since it's overall more challenging. So let's talk about this puzzle. It probably takes a bit of tinkering to wrap your head around what's going on here, which is that each of the projectiles are launched at different speeds that you can activate from the fonts, and each projectile teleports you to the next platform. There are 4 platforms. Well, let's think about this with only 2 platforms. Let's say you have platform 1 and platform 2, number 1 and number 2. You teleport to number 1 first. The projectile that moves to number 1 moves at 10 meters per second. The one that moves to number 2 at 200 meters per second. Well then, in order to get hit by the one at number 2, you basically have to get there ASAP, since it moves so fast, right? So you start number 1 way earlier. That way when you teleport to number 1, which is instantaneous, you get hit almost immediately by number 1, so you can guarantee that you also get hit by number 2, which you start right before teleporting. And so that's the idea, is like, in order to get hit by the one at number 2, you basically have to get there ASAP. So you start at number 1 way earlier, and then wait until it's very close, then start at number 2, so that you're nearly instantly teleported. So same concept, except we have 4 platforms here, so you want to start the slower ones first and start the faster ones later. But there's an order here because they all vary. With enough accuracy, you're guaranteed to... So you basically have to be just accurate enough, not perfect, that you're guaranteed to be hit by each one. This is definitely a higher level of difficulty than the ones we saw prior. As for the boss, there's platforms which you basically teleport on. You have a teleportation spell, and you basically just DPS down the boss while avoiding the cannons which shoot explosive rounds every so often. Pretty much it's just a matter of dodging or LOSing the explosive magic until you kill the boss, and then a teleportation tower pops up above you in the sky, and then that's good. You're done with that. Pretty straightforward. There are moving walls that move up and down, so you basically have to... it's kind of a DPS race, in that you want to do as much damage as possible before the walls go down, in which case you probably can't really damage him. Now, if you chose the puzzle, you get teleported to a different part of the next level. Mostly pretty straightforward, just a little bit more hassle in one case. There's another kind of puzzle if you do it the long way, which we'll talk about. It's also pretty straightforward, I think. It's just basically activating all the things to get them all closed at the same time. So like there's like 6 nodes, 6 buttons, activators, whatever, and each one activates on another one nearby. This is one of those where you have to put them all in the same position, closed position, and you just have to guess the order in which they are to be activated. It's a pretty common puzzle, actually, across games. I noticed that ports, by the way, I noticed that the port to SSE, by the way, basically destroys the image space settings by default. So if there's a mod moved into SSE, if they're not updated ports, the image space is basically non-existent. Hence, this level and a number of others look better in Oldrim, funnily enough.
Well, you made it. I'm surprised. I've heard that some people get trapped here until their minds rot.
You defile this place with your presence, lizard.
Is that how you welcome an old friend?
We are not friends. We never were.
Dragon, this is Solace, the resident runt of this god's damned place.
You are not improving your lip, Zard. Tides willing, I can trap you here for an eternity.
Don't you remember my name? Typical. Once you got what you wanted, you give me the cold shoulder. Aren't you a little curious about why I'm here?
I assume you want to drag me into your convolved machinations once again.
Just like last time, I want to in fact, I have something your master wants.
A deal? What could you possibly have that we do not possess?
A dragon book for starters. How's that sound?
And you have brought along this Dragonborn to coddle your adventurism.
We have a whole thing going on. I can explain later. We need the Dragonborn for the key.
The Dragonborn can unlock the seal with a shout. Yes, I see your point. So, this was not spontaneous. You actually had a reason to bring him along.
So, are you going to help us, or what?
We merely recovered Silvermore.
Not exactly.
What do you mean, not exactly?
Someone else took it already.
But how could they possibly?
It's a long story, probably. Not important.
What precisely do you want me to do if I do not know where the book went?
Well, there are 2 books, aren't there? I'm guessing they want the second one as well.
The other book is in danger of being taken. You arrive with an omen lizard.
Look, I'm not here to give you Secunda. I'm making you an offer. We take back the first book, you keep the second. Deal?
I suppose I have an obligation anyway. We can meet at... Do not worry, I have a map.
You think I'm supposed to know where that is?
It is a Dwemer transporter, not too far from Silvermore. The fact that you are traveling with that Cavalier ruffian is already ominous. But I had once done so as well, so I will give you the benefit of the doubt. To the uninitiated, they are mere folklore. But to us, they are obfuscations of written power. And more importantly, they are not yet in this library. Goodbye.
Okay. Also, I forgot to mention a number of things. There is an optional... So there are a lot of, like, optional things in the dialogue where you can be offered a side quest or, like, a side level, I guess, that you don't have to go to, but there's some extra thing. And there's a number of things, like, throughout. There's dungeons and stuff that you can explore that have nothing to do with anything throughout. But there's also side quests, like there's one that I am skipping. So I'm skipping a lot of it here because I just want like the beef, the main part of it. And if I do these extra things, it's just going to take forever. Also, another thing I forgot about SSE is that SSE fixed this insane sound clipping thing where dialogue, because this is in Old Rim, but in SSE the dialogue is fixed. So sometimes the dialogue sound will just stop working for like a half a second or a quarter of a second. And at some point it was working for me, and then I must have upgraded something and it stopped working. It started doing this clipping thing. So that's fixed. That's another reason to go at SSE at least. Even though it's not clear cut like I mentioned before.
If you want to stay behind, be my guest. It doesn't make
And also,
Yourself as a minor. For what?
throughout pretty much,
The artifact.
not even just here, but in general, I found that using
For yourself.
the
Well, it's not for me,
invincibility shall
my employers.
become ethereal
Rest assured, I'm
is
only
actually
helping you. That may
unusually or unappreciated. It's very useful in general. I don't know if like other people use it with just a vanilla setup, but I found just in combat, especially for melee, it's very useful if there's like a bunch of people where you're trying to avoid being hit by some really heavy hitting spell. Become ethereal is definitely something I would use, and I use it a lot here.
What was that? Who's there?